It was the kind of night that tested every ounce of a man's soul. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets, swallowing the small mountain town in silence. Wind howled through the pine trees like a warning no one could ignore. Inside an old wooden cabin on the edge of town, a single light burned through the storm. That cabin belonged to James, a single father and war veteran who had spent years fighting battles overseas, only to return home to fight quieter ones, loneliness, grief, and the constant worry of providing for his little girl, Lily. James wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. What he had was a heart that refused to turn away from someone in need. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed and stoked the last of the firewood, he thought it would just be another long, frozen night in the wilderness. But fate had different plans. Near midnight, headlights cut through the snow. Then another. Then another. Soon the distant rumble of engines echoed across the frozen valley, though these weren't trucks or cars. They were motorcycles. Or at least, they should have been. Instead, 15 rugged bikers pushed their steel beasts through the blizzard, engines dead, wheels frozen stiff from ice. Their leather jackets were covered in snow, faces red with cold. On their vests, one patch stood out clearly, Hell's Angels. For a moment, James froze. Memories of the battlefield rushed back, of danger, of men who lived by different rules. He knew their reputation. He knew the town would never open its doors to them. But when he saw their eyes, men exhausted, frostbitten, some barely standing, he didn't see outlaws. He saw soldiers, men caught in a storm they couldn't fight. Without thinking twice, James opened his door. "Get inside, quick," he shouted over the wind. "Before you freeze to death." The bikers hesitated, not used to strangers offering kindness. But one by one, they filed in, stamping snow from their boots. The cabin was small, too small for 15 men, but James made it work. He gave up his own bed, spread out blankets, boiled what little soup he had left. Lily peeked out from her room, wide-eyed but unafraid. She whispered, "Daddy, are they staying with us?" James knelt beside her and said, "Sometimes the world gives us people who need us. Tonight, it's them." The storm raged all night. The fire burned low, but James kept feeding it, even breaking apart old furniture to keep everyone warm. He shared stories with the bikers, telling them about his service, his daughter, his struggles after the war. In return, they told him about their road trips, the families they rarely saw, the battles they fought not with guns but with the weight of their own pasts. By morning, something had shifted. They were no longer strangers. They were brothers. When the storm broke, the bikers shook James's hand, thanked him, and promised they'd never forget what he'd done. James smiled politely, but deep down, he thought he'd never see them again. He went back to his quiet life, chopping wood, raising Lily, stretching every dollar to make ends meet. But fate wasn't finished with him yet. The very next morning, just as the sun began melting the last of the snow, James heard a sound that rattled his windows. The low thunder of engines, hundreds of them. He stepped outside, shielding his eyes from the light, and what he saw left him speechless. Lined up in front of his cabin were not 15 motorcycles, but 102. Chrome gleamed, engines roared, and men with leather vests and tattoos stood tall. The Hells Angels had returned, and this time, they hadn't come alone. The leader stepped forward, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek. He put a hand on James's shoulder and said, "You gave us shelter when no one else would. You didn't ask who we were. You just helped. Now it's our turn." That day, James's life changed. The bikers repaired his cabin, stacked firewood higher than his roof, filled his pantry with food, and even left envelopes of cash tucked under the door. Lily ran around the yard, laughing as the bikers lifted her onto motorcycles, letting her honk the horns and wear their oversized helmets. The cabin that once felt so lonely was now alive with laughter, noise, and the bond of unexpected family. The townsfolk who had judged those men from a distance watched in disbelief. They had spent years fearing them, whispering about their reputation. But here they were, protecting a veteran and his daughter, showing loyalty most couldn't even dream of. As the sun dipped below the horizon, James stood on his porch, Lily in his arms, watching the line of bikes stretch down the road like a river of chrome and thunder. He felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of belonging. He realized that family doesn't always come from blood. Sometimes, it comes from the people you least expect, the ones who show up when you need them most. And as the last motorcycle disappeared into the distance, Lily whispered, "Daddy, are they our friends now?" James kissed her forehead and smiled. "They're more than friends, sweetheart. They're family. So if you're watching this right now, remember this story the next time someone knocks on your door in the middle of a storm. Kindness is never wasted. It may just come back to you 100-fold, sometimes on the roar of 102 motorcycles. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who believes in the power of kindness, and subscribe to this channel for more stories that remind us that hope, love, and humanity still exist. Because at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to find warmth in the storm.